Welcome back to Genome Design, where this week we're going to be doing one of our Stage 1 Plus packages on this 2018 Gen 2 Turbo S. So we need to explain what is included in our Stage 1 Plus package. As you can see here in my left hand, because I can't hold both pieces, we've got race cats from Quicksilver. This car has already got the BMC filter that we recommend as part of that package. Now, the reason it isn't a full-blown Stage 2 is because this is going to keep its standard intercoolers. So the customer was looking for a little bit more noise and a lot more power, but wasn't intending on going quite as far as putting the intercoolers on. So that's something that we can look at in the future. If he gets used to the power and he's happy to spend some more money, we'll add the intercoolers and then we'll increase the boost pressure to make a little bit more power and torque and take it to a full Stage 2. But for now, the race cats and the BMC filter, which you'll see when Andy strips the back of the car off, that's enough for us to be able to tune this ready to a Stage 1 Plus package. We're expecting somewhere in the region of 660 to 670 horsepower. It may make a little bit more, we won't know until we get into the calibration, and we will be tuning the gearbox at the same time to make sure that we up the clamping pressure, reset the shift points to a better point, and also increase the shifting speed. So if you were to tune just the engine on this car, which some people offer to do, it's not what we would recommend, given that you're going to be requesting somewhere in the region of an extra 100 foot-pounds of torque. Ideally, by doing the clutches and offering more clutch pressure, that is the equivalent of buying a manual car and tuning it without upgrading the clutch. Obviously, this is automatic, so by increasing clutch pressure, that would be the equivalent of having a manual and then improving the clutch before you decide to tune the vehicle. Now, we've shown you the car getting loaded onto the dyno and the initial pre-checks that we do prior to running it up stock. We have found that the inlet temperatures were getting very, very warm. It's a bit of a battle for us and every other dyno place, really, because the engines are in the back and the intercoolers at the back, and that causes a lot of problem trying to get cooling in. So our fan is massive. It's one of the biggest in the country, but it's at the front of the car. So you've got to imagine that the air's got to travel over and get down into the intake side here. And the biggest thing that we suffer is where the air should go into the side of the car when it's moving down the road and feed into these intercoolers. Obviously, when you're blowing at the front of the car, it goes up and over, but you don't really get any airflow down the sides. So what we've done is we've removed the back bumper in the interest of being able to get these extra cooling fans that we've got feeding directly onto the intercooler packs here. It's not ideal because you're blowing back up and trying to blow in at the side, so it creates a bit of a pressure differential. However, it's the best option that we've got at the moment. Something that we are looking at doing right now is 3D printing some bits to go onto the end of here, and some stands and some more 3D printed bits that will allow us to feed air directly into these and give a more representative example of driving the car down the road. So, with all that in mind, we have managed to get the intake temps down a little bit. We'll drop a data log into the video so that people can see just how hot it was getting. Originally, with the bumper on, we were getting up to 60 degrees intake temps at 6,000 RPM. Bearing in mind today it's about 10 degrees in the cell, so it's 6 times hotter than the ambient temperature. That wouldn't be something that would happen on the road. It's purely because we're not able to get enough cooling into the into the system to be able to run it accurately. Now what that does is the ECU will adapt the amount of ignition timing that it adds. It will reduce torque request, which in turn reduces boost pressure. So it's doing what it's supposed to do when it sees something getting too hot. Now, some tuners might relax that, so there's options to relax the amount of ignition timing that it pulls, or you can relax how much torque request it reduces based on intake air temperature. It's not something that I would recommend, and when we log the cars on the dyno, both pre and post tune, we then do the same process again out on the road, which gives us a more accurate view as to where it's producing its power and how much boost and what the ignition timing is doing. So with the bumper off, we've managed to reduce the inlet temperatures down to about 35-40 degrees, which has made a much cleaner graph, and it's now making roughly what the stock car should make. So we've got behind me on the graph here, we've got a nice steady power curve here, which is the blue line. Again, we could drop these graphs in for people to see more accurately if they want to. But the blue line is our power line, which is again at the wheels. So we must stress this is what's at the wheels. The green line here is our torque. So Porsche quote this car at 580 horsepower and around 550 foot-pounds of torque. That's exactly what we've got here, just over 550 foot-pounds as it comes on boost. And it's a nice steady graph all the way along. We've got 515 wheel horsepower, which gives us a correction factor for drivetrain losses of around 12%. So when we tune the car, we would use a 12% correction factor to get from our wheel horsepower result to a sort of rough engine figure. It's always better to quote at the wheels, in my opinion. So what we're going to do now, we've reviewed the logs, which again we'll drop that in, and we're kind of happy with where it's at. It's the best that we're going to get based on how much cooling we can get to the intercoolers and into the inlet system. We're now going to go with a version 1 tune, which we always start a little bit less aggressive. We're aiming for about 1.7 bar. We've seen these with various different tunes on running up to 2 bar. That, in my opinion, is a little bit high, but it's you know, it's subjective to every tuner's opinion. So I would probably be comfortable at like 1.85, somewhere around there, with a nice timing trace. So we're going to start a little bit lower, and then we'll work up to that. So version 1, I'm aiming at 1.7 bar. You know, a nice steady amount of timing. Let's see what ignition is being pulled out. So we'll introduce ignition timing until it starts to, the knock control starts to pull it back. Then once we get to that point, we'll work on the boost profile. Once we're happy with that, we'll then test it on the road. If it's not pulling any timing out on the road, then we know obviously it's due to airflow and temperature. So the next step here will be to see Andrew loading the stage 1 file onto the car, running it up, and then we'll review that graph as well. Right, so we quickly thought that we would give people some visuals about the temperature that I was talking about before. So just as a very, very quick example, this is pre-removal of the bumper. So the green line is the RPM, and this sort of white line here is the intake temperature essentially. So you can see obviously as it gets to 3,200 RPM, it's coming on full boost and it's flying up. Now, you're always going to struggle to battle that on the dyno. However, what's good for a reference point of view is if we take a point here, for example, at 5,984 RPM, you can see the intake temperature is at 54.75 degrees. If I flick across to this graph where we've removed the bumper and we're able to get a little bit more cooling in, if I go to 5,900 on there, we've dropped it down to 30.75. So by getting some additional cooling to the intercoolers and into the intake system, we've reduced the temperature during the pull down by the best part of 25 degrees, which is massive. That would be even more apparent on the tuned run because you're increasing boost pressure, which in turn creates heat. So ultimately, that is what I'm talking about when I'm explaining about the intake temperatures. So we're now going to talk about the results from the stage 1 file. Obviously, as I explained, we're starting a little bit low to see where we end up. But as it happens, our version 1 has pretty much given me exactly what I wanted it to do. So the car's doing 610 wheel horsepower, so we've picked up just short. So 95 wheel horsepower is massive. It's well over 100 horsepower gain. The mid-range is unreal. I mean, we're doing 680 foot-pounds of torque, where on the old file, the stock file, yeah, it peaked a little bit earlier here due to the load. That's the way the dyno loads it up. So it does change down the bottom here where you don't really drive. But the reality is where the car was making about 525 foot-pounds, we're now making 680 foot-pounds. So it's absolutely enormous. What we can see is how it's flatlined here, which is good. I mean, I'm still happy with that. But what you would find on the road where it's creating a little bit less heat, you would probably find that would carry on and make a little bit more power. So where I'm at 610 wheel horsepower gives us, at 12% correction, you're talking 685 horsepower, so it's massive. It's a little bit more than I was expecting at the lower levels of boost, but it seems really happy with that. What I'm going to do, I mean, I'm happy to leave this like this and get it on the road, but out of interest, I'm going to go, this is currently doing about 1.6 bar here, 1.5 bar. I'm going to add a little bit more boost pressure down the bottom and a little bit more boost pressure at the top here. So we're going to try and peak it up to about 1.85 bar at the top. And as it comes on, we're going to aim for around 1.65, just to see what that, a little more breathing on it would do. I suspect what we're going to find is that we'll create more torque, but as a result of the heat that's created from the extra boost down the bottom, I think we will probably find that it will hold it back on the dyno. So we'll run the car, we'll build that file now, flash it on, we'll run the car up, and then we'll data log on, we've data logged this file, we'll data log the new file, which is going to be slightly more aggressive, and then we'll take it from there. So now you've seen us flash and run the slightly more aggressive file, and you'll have to just excuse some noise in the background. The lads are working on some other projects. It's leading up to Christmas and everybody wants the cars back. But exactly as I anticipated, what we've done here, you can see the dotted line is the comparison line for this latest tune. So solid line is version 1 with slightly less boost, so slightly less aggressive. Version 2 is slightly more boost pressure and it's slightly more aggressive. But as I explained, I thought this would happen. What we've got here is we've got quite a bit more in the mid-range, so you've got in the region of about 25 wheel horsepower. And again here we've filled this gap and we've given it a nice amount there, sort of where it was dropping off before. As a result of that, as expected, when we've gotten up to just above 6,000 RPM, the car is getting a little bit hot, the inlet temps are getting a bit high, and as a result the ECU pulls it backwards to compensate for the fact that it's getting warm. So whilst we've gained in the mid-range, we've actually lost at the top. Now on the road this might be a slightly different story, and in actual fact with the airflow that you'd get on the road you might find this carries on, and it's minimal gains. So for the extra boost pressure, I personally think there's such a small amount to be gained, and this does happen regularly. People keep adding boost, adding timing, and there comes a point where the gains are so minor for the amount of extra boost that you're having to add that it's not worth it, and it's not going to make it. It's certainly not going to drive as nice on the road. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to version 1 tune, get the car off the dyno, go on the road and do some road logs. We'll road log version 1, see where we're at with that, and see if it, you know, if it's really happy on the road. We'll try version 2, we'll road log that, which again has got a little bit of extra boost, and and up the top here where we're suffering on the dyno, we might find that on the road it doesn't. We'll see which one drives nicest. Obviously, all we can do on the dyno is the full throttle and high load stuff. We need to go out on the road to ensure that the part throttle and all the drivability settings are set up right. So it's all well and good making massive numbers on the dyno, but if you don't spend some time smoothing everything out and fine-tuning it on the road, what you might find is a jerky throttle pedal, or it comes on boost and it because the load is different, you get some little bits of boost creep or slight changes in the throttle path and things like that. So it's really important to do this bit, but then spend equal amount of time tidying everything up on the road. So we'll get it off now. We'll ask Andrew to get it on the floor. We'll probably take him with us so he can do the data logging with me, and then we'll report back on that. So you've seen some of the monstrous videos of this thing driving on the road. Obviously we can't go too mental on the public highway, and it's a customer's car. So whilst he's given us access to be able to use it, we've treated it with respect. Everything's now done, complete. We're completely happy with how the car drives, how it logs on the road, the results from the dyno, which are obviously behind me and are massive. We're now at a point where we can wrap this video up, and if anybody's interested in having this done, or indeed any Porsche that you've got, the best thing to do is always to give us a call and we'll discuss a bespoke package for you. Putting a price on something is almost impossible on the basis that every car is different. We do have a base price for a stage 1 package or a stage 2 package, which we'll link to below. However, realistically, every customer's demands and needs are completely different. So it's always best to give one of the team a call. We'll go through an individual bespoke package for your car that fits a budget for you, and then we'll go from there. So thank you very much for watching. It'd be great if you could subscribe. Any shares are always welcome, and we'll see you on this next video.